The mess hall of the Galactic Coalition frigate Harmony's Edge buzzed with the usual cacophony of a dozen different species trying to coexist in a space barely large enough for half their number. Sergeant Marcus Chen sat alone at a corner table, methodically working through what the ship's food processors optimistically labeled as human-compatible protein substitute. It tasted like cardboard soaked in synthetic beef flavoring, but after 3 months aboard the ship, he'd learned not to complain. Across the room, Sub-Commander Vexitar clicked his mandibles in amusement as he regaled his Krillian squad mates with another story of human incompetence. The chitinous alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, his exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lighting. His 4 arms gestured dramatically as he spoke, each movement calculated to draw more attention from the growing crowd. The human actually thought it could keep up during the combat drill, Vexitar's translator rendered his clicking into standard galactic. Pathetic little creature barely reached my thorax. When I suggested it might be more suited to cleaning duties, it had the audacity to glare at me. Laughter rippled through the gathered aliens. Chen kept his head down, focusing on his meal. He'd heard worse during his 2 decades in the Earth Defense Corps before the Coalition integration. Bullies were bullies, regardless of how many limbs they had or what planet they called home. Perhaps, Vexitar continued, his compound eyes glinting with malicious humor, I should demonstrate proper Krillian discipline techniques, show the human how we maintain order in our ranks. Chen's fork paused halfway to his mouth. The mess hall had grown quieter, conversations dying as more beings turned to watch the spectacle. He could feel their stares, some curious, others anticipatory. A few of the other human crew members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The sub-commander's heavy footsteps approached Chen's table, each impact reverberating through the deck plating. Chen set down his fork and looked up calmly, meeting Vexitar's multifaceted gaze without flinching. Human, Vexitar said, looming over the seated soldier. Stand when a superior addresses you. Chen remained seated. According to Coalition regulations, sir, rank equality protocols apply during meal periods. I'm not required to stand. A collective intake of breath swept through the watching crowd. Vexitar's mandibles spread wider, what passed for a smile among his species. Ah, the little human knows regulations. How quaint. Without warning, Vexitar's lower right arm shot out, striking Chen across the face with enough force to knock a normal human from their chair. The slap echoed through the suddenly silent mess hall like a gunshot. Chen's head snapped to the side, but he remained seated. A thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Slowly, deliberately, he turned back to face the sub-commander and wiped the blood away with his thumb. Is that all, sir? Chen's voice remained perfectly level, betraying no emotion. Vexitar's compound eyes widened slightly. Most species would have been unconscious, or at least stunned by such a blow. The human hadn't even been knocked from his chair. Still, the Krillian's pride demanded he continue the show. Perhaps you need a proper lesson in respect, human? Vexitar drew back his arm for a more serious strike. Chen moved. 20 years of combat experience compressed into a single fluid motion. He rose from his chair as Vexitar's fist descended simultaneously, stepping inside the alien's reach and driving his own fist upward. The punch connected with Vexitar's mandible joint with surgical precision, not enough force to cause permanent damage, but more than sufficient to send the sub-commander crashing backward into an empty table. The mess hall erupted in chaos. Aliens scrambled away from the confrontation, while others pressed closer for a better view. Vexitar lay among the wreckage of collapsed furniture, one of his mandible teeth skittering across the deck plating. Purple blood oozed from where Chen's knuckles had found their mark. Chen straightened his uniform and returned to his seat, picking up his fork as if nothing had happened. Self-defense, sir. Coalition Regulation 47B clearly states that all personnel have the right to protect themselves from unprovoked assault, regardless of rank. Commander Zephai, the ship's Valdorian captain, materialized at the edge of the crowd. Her crystalline features betrayed no emotion as she surveyed the scene. Her sub-commander groaning among broken furniture, a human calmly eating processed protein, and a mess hall full of witnesses. "Report," she commanded in her melodious voice. A dozen species began talking at once, but Chen's clear, measured tone cut through the babble. "Sub-Commander Vexitar struck me without provocation during my designated meal period, Captain. I responded with appropriate defensive force as outlined in Coalition combat protocols." Zephai's prismatic eyes shifted to Vexitar, who was struggling to his feet with assistance from his squad mates. "Sub-Commander, your version?" Vexitar glared at Chen with undisguised hatred, purple blood still dripping from his damaged mandible. "The human attacked me. It should be thrown in the brig." "After you struck him first," Zephai observed. She'd reviewed the security footage streaming directly to her neural interface. In front of 47 witnesses. The captain's gaze swept the assembled crowd before returning to Vexitar. "Sub-Commander, you are hereby reduced to the rank of Senior Specialist for conduct unbecoming an officer and assault on a fellow crew member. You will also report to Medical for dental repair, then to Commander Rask for disciplinary review." Vexitar's mandibles clicked in outrage. "Captain, you cannot—" "I can, and I have." Zephai's voice carried the crystalline edge that had made. Her species feared negotiators throughout the galaxy. "Dismissed, Senior Specialist Vexitar." As the humiliated Krillian shuffled from the mess hall, followed by his embarrassed squad mates, normal conversation gradually resumed. Chen continued, eating his meal, seemingly oblivious to the whispered discussions taking place around him. Captain Zephai approached his table. "Sergeant Chen." "Captain." Chen looked up respectfully but remained seated, as was his right during meal period. "Impressive response time. Your military record mentions extensive hand-to-hand combat training." 20 years, ma'am. Old habits." Zephai's features shifted slightly, the Valdorian equivalent of a smile. "Indeed. Perhaps you might consider conducting some cross-training sessions for our crew. It seems some of them could benefit from learning about human defensive capabilities." Chen allowed himself a small smile. "I'd be happy to, Captain. Always willing to share Earth's educational resources with our coalition partners." As the captain moved on, Chen returned to his meal. Around the mess hall, he noticed several aliens stealing glances in his direction, not with mockery this time, but with something approaching respect, even curiosity. It occurred to him that his cardboard-flavored protein substitute was starting to taste better. Strange how quickly attitudes could change with the proper application of diplomacy. Human diplomacy, backed by 20 years of experience and a perfectly timed right cross. The universe, Chen reflected, was about to get a crash course in why humans had earned their place among the stars. Not despite their physical limitations, but because they had learned to turn every disadvantage into strength, every challenge into opportunity. And bullies, regardless of species, always learned the same lesson in the end.